We would like to be offered a Ferrari 456M GT manual. UK right-hand drive, Manish?
Please.
Fine. If you have one, get in touch with us.
With warranty.
With warranty. Yeah. Needs to be one owner from new, 5,000 miles, green over tan.
Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Collecting Addicts podcast. There is still no new name. However, JLR has announced it wants to kill the name Land Rover, which we all think is utter madness. We'll discuss that after I've apologised in advance for the fact that we're recording this on Zoom and it might be a bit what the techs call glitchy. I don't know what that means, but hopefully it allows us to cock it up a bit and not get in trouble. JLR is going to ditch Land Rover, or then they posted a story the next day saying they weren't going to ditch Land Rover. Chris Cooper, can you summarise the shambles for us?
It's a shambles. Can I say more? So I was trying hard to think about, there are very few automotive brands that have quite the longevity and the authenticity and the originality. I'm sure all of us, and I'm sure most people listening, will know the story about two lovely chaps sketching out in the sand on a beach in Wales, the classic shape of a Series 1 Defender. And it's kind of, it's the 911 shape. It's the 911 shape for something which isn't a 911, in a way that even a Golf doesn't really have. So the Land Rover brand is, I mean, you literally couldn't make it up. It's original, it's authentic, and it gives credibility. I can see the problem they thought they were trying to solve. The problem they thought they're trying to solve is, we've got this thing called Jaguar Land Rover, and they kind of almost made it worse by having these wonderful new showrooms, all of which are going to have to go now. If you read in the trade mags inside the dealer, I mean, Edward, you probably see the stuff as well. There's, a lot of people spent a lot of money on stuff that isn't going to last much longer. So they had two businesses, and it's really just one business. So I could see they wanted to create one business, but to come up with JLR, and it's like sort of the worst excesses of the early 2000s when these meaningless names, Consignia, everyone remember Consignia?
The post office.
Post office, yeah. How long did that last? And I hope JLR will last even less time than that. There's a problem with the Jaguar brand, and we've talked about it before, but I have to talk about it again. Some of us were at the Bicester Heritage Scramble this weekend. Wonderful event. If you haven't been, it's just wonderful. Really, really uplifting, optimistic, great. And there was a chap there
sponsored by an auction platform called Collecting Cars, I gather.
It was indeed. It was indeed. Yeah, some people were even wearing their clothing, which would have been lovely to have worn, but none was available.
It's coming.
And there's a guy from Jaguar Heritage Trust there who was saying, I got two of my sons are working there, lots of amazing product coming. So we hope, we remain optimistic about Jaguar as a company, but talk about tying both hands behind your back. I mean, what I think they've explained is that the little oval with the sort of the Land Rover symbol, that sort of Z-shaped symbol, that will survive. But no, it's a systematic, self-inflicted act of corporate kamikaze.
Is there anything to do with, and it's only just come to my head, that the Grenadier, the first customer deliveries are about to start happening?
Yep.
And they obviously lost a case against owning the shape in the same way that 911, I think, owned the silhouette of a 911.
They did, but I actually don't think the Grenadier and Ineos is a threat to Land Rover, because the breadth of the Land Rover brand now is so much bigger. So no, I think it's not an all farts thing. It's not an all farts thing. Young people, I know that they may not think people don't look for Land Rover, look for Discovery or Range Rover online, whatever it is. That's, it'd be like Mercedes saying we don't need, or BMW saying we don't need a corporate brand anymore. Like Porsche saying we just need 911. I mean, nobody thinks this way. So Adrian Mardell, where we are. He's the new current CEO. They don't seem to last very long at the moment, of JLR. All of us are available, and we are passionate and optimistic. We want to help. We're not trying to chat. We're not trying to criticize. We want to help, but we feel strongly about this.
I'm not available because I know nothing about running a car company, by the way. Everyone else here is a grown-up. I haven't got a clue. I'd piss it up the wall in 5 minutes. Neil Clifford.
Is this another April Fool's? Are we just doing April Fool's jokes every week? Because I didn't know about the JLR thing, Chris. If the JLR thing, as in the badge and JLR, if that is the new company and the new brand name, that sounds to me like it's a cost-cutting thing. That we've got 2 marketing people, 2 directors of production, two.
Very good.
So
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. You can have, I mean, lots of organizations have decided that you've got product lines or whatever, and you can, that's the whole point of having, VW trying to buy all these businesses. What an Octavia is, a Golf is, a Seat is, a whatever it is. That's fine. And they've been doing that, trying to do that for some time.
Platform sharing, they call it.
Yeah, it's platform sharing.
Yes.
And you see, everything about the car industry, Chris.
He does.
You can do. When we go there, you're going to be with us. So it's a corporate identity. I kind of get it. And I spend some of my professional life looking at stuff like this. But to have lost and have ditched so much of the equity, it's credible and authentic. And you look at that badge, you know exactly what brands mean. When people look at the words, and it creates a set of feelings and images and impressions which are really, really hard to build and very expensive to build. And so yeah, I think it's.
I thought Chris's analogy last week about Mini, of the new Lions taking over the pack, I thought was a very good analogy, because maybe it is about 35-year-old millennials who are now in positions of directorships at these companies and looking at the Google searches and saying, well, no one ever Googles Land Rover. So why the fuck do we need Land Rover? Everyone searches for Discovery and Range Rover and Defender. So that's the brand name.
Because there's a little bit of Land Rover in each of those product lines. And to bring it to life,
I'm not justifying it, Chris.
No, I'm saying,
stupid, but I think that maybe that's how they've got to the thinking.
I'm sure you may be right, Neil, but I would say that, from our point of view, and this is free advice, very good people who are all very, very competent people trying to do the right thing for the right reasons. This is our passionate reaction to it. That there's a bit of Land Rover in each of those product lines. And if you lose somebody thinking about what makes a Land Rover, whether it's manifest as a Range Rover or a Discovery or Defender, something's gone out the door, and that ain't good.
We should be consulting. I own a Series 1, a Series 2, a Series 3, 3 Defenders, 3 Range Rovers. So if anyone actually needs a bit of help on what to do with this bloody thing,
like the only person here needs help is you, mate.
Exactly. I do need some help. It's clear.
No, I was going to say, I mean, what you're saying, Neil, is sort of quite analogous to somebody at Eon Productions turning around and saying, well, you know what, nobody Googles James Bond. They Google From Russia with Love, or they Google The Spy Who Loved Me, or they Google, Skyfall. So guess what? We don't need James Bond. James Bond is kind of just this generic character who we replace anyway every few years. So let's just, that's a really, really good point. And that also just the concept that you may well have 2 corporate entities having a little bit of a chat, and the only compromise they can come up with is JLR, which, makes no sense if you are old.
I find the whole thing quite baffling. I remember a while ago, I was asked to write something for I think probably a broadsheet. I think it was more a newspaper than a magazine. And I was asked to define what were the iconic cars that were still in production, and then they were still making a Defender. And I could only think of 3. They were the Porsche 911, the Caterham 7, and the Defender, because they had lasted longer than anything else, and they were so instantly recognizable that you could put them in front of non-car people and they'd know what they were. The Caterham probably a bit tenuous, but I still think it worked. I was very proud that 2 were British. I think that when Land Rover decided to not make something that looked like an old Defender, that was both brave, but I think it probably helped them make this decision.
Yeah, that's fine.
But that, in not having a car that looks like a Defender, you can argue they've lost the genetic link to that original vehicle called the Land Rover, and that made it easier probably for some people in that company to do this. I think the G-Wagon is a great example of a product that shamelessly looks like something from the 1970s, but works very, very well for them. I'd love to know what the numbers are on G-Wagon versus Defender. I suspect the G-Wagon might outdo it in terms of making money, but it's just another. death by a thousand cuts. And also it just means that we all don't understand what's going on at JLR. Move the conversation on to Jaguar now. Jerry McGovern's going to be tasked with making a new load of Jaguars, a family of Jaguars that are going to be electric and hugely expensive and long wheelbase and luxurious. I'm not sure the world gives a shit anymore. I'm not sure the dealer network will know what to do with them. It's a great shame. I want Jaguar to succeed, but I just don't see it, to the point where when I hear you lot talking, I think to myself, why not just kill Jaguar and make a Range Rover saloon car? Maybe that would probably sell better.
Yes, it's a really interesting question.
Thing.
It's a really interesting question. And again, the risk of over egging how wonderful the scrambles are at Bicester. There was an XJS, one of the Tom Walkinshaw XJS race cars that was on pole at Bathurst in the mid-80s, and Tom Walkinshaw and Wyn Percy's name on the side of it, original car. And you thought, and there was, somebody had a Mark 1 XJ12, sort of early 70s, beautiful thing. Number of other XJ12C coupe, lovely, lovely things. You think, crikey, you lose that at your peril. There's a lot in that. And I'm actually hopeful that a lot of what Jerry McGovern did at Land Rover, like he was conspicuously anti a lot of what he thought Land Rover as a brand stood for. So some of you may have noticed a few years ago, you couldn't order a green Discovery because I think there was some metropolitan, green's about countryside. We don't do countryside. We want to be.
That was stupid as well. They had 7 greys.
Yeah. we like green because it's a nice color, not because we're from the countryside. Although personally, I think there's nothing wrong with the countryside. So I'm optimistic. You got to do something. It can't just be a bit more. Jaguar has got to be completely reimagined. It's got a wonderful brand. It's got very little else. So I would say it's worth a go. He's got to be bold. And what would Jaguar look like? You know, grace, pace, and space were its William Lyons watchwords. And you think in a modern world with an EV infrastructure and drivetrain,
Has Giles Corran killed the electric Jaguar forever, though? I mean, that story went so
that did
wide.
Yeah, they'll have to overcome that. But no, I'm a bit. It does sound a bit when you hear those stories, and I heard some of them this weekend and elsewhere. It did sound a bit like, is Danny Baha back?
Oh, don't bring him back.
We've got 7 new Jaguars. They're all going to be the best in class.
Yeah.
Look, Jaguar's been rebooted more times than fucking Top Gear. Take the hint. I just don't think there's space there at the moment. I really don't. And we're looking at lots of brands in turmoil, trying to resurrect that. I love Jaguar, but maybe the kindest thing you could do is just put it in a museum. Let us remember how great it was. Maybe that's not insulting. Maybe the most insulting thing you can do is drag the bloody thing through another reboot.
I think Chris, you say museum, I was just thinking of a wonderful thing an Italian said to me, who are very good at this shit, was if you have heritage, but without modernity, just dust, you have a museum.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's what Jaguar have.
And I think the challenge for McGovern is to say, how do those Jaguar values resonate? How do you manifest them in the modern world with the constraints of an EV? And if there's a good answer to that question, we wish it luck. We really do. I think it's worth a go. I mean, I don't know what numbers look like. I imagine they're pretty scary. But it's worth a go. And I just think it would be, if they thought it was too hard, it looks too hard, can't give it a go, that'd be really disappointing. But you're right, Neil, you can't do what, rest his soul, Jeff Lawson, who was the designer at Jaguar before Ian Callum, that S-type in the late 90s. That was just backward looking.
No, that was like a Chinese does Jaguar.
That was that's the crazy thing is that was one of my first ever jobs in this industry, 1998. I remember going there with Mike Cross, Steve Sutcliffe, Peter Robinson. We went to Wales to drive the S-type Jaguar against all its rivals. We stayed at the Bear in Krakow. We used that Moor Road there for 3 days. It was quite rigorous in those days. That was Jaguar rebooting itself. It's been rebooting itself for 25 years. You can argue it's been rebooting itself since the E-Type. I wonder whether enough is enough. And I'm so fond of them, and I don't want people to lose jobs. I just wonder whether the Land Rover, this is the crazy thing, the Land Rover Range Rover brand is so strong, that's where the money is. Pump it all into that, make a Range Rover saloon car. It would fly, I think. If you had everyone that wanted to buy a Range Rover were offered an EV that could do 200 miles an hour and was 250 grand, they'd all buy one.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I suspect that's what would happen. Okay, I don't like telling people how to run businesses because I'm crap at it. I got too close to it there. I have to go and wash my mouth out with soap. Moving on to a more important issue. Okay, I'm going to stand on a soapbox to deliver this one. I've got a problem with leather seats. I can't think of a situation in which a leather seat is superior to a cloth seat, other than now and again they smell nice. And when the hide is of very high quality and is waxy and soft, aesthetically, it is pleasant. But you slide around on them. They don't grip you very well. Sometimes they age poorly. Quite often the materials they use aren't as described, i.e. they're not leather, they're lubber, they're leathery rubber. I don't understand the death of the velour seat. It must be based on cost. But if you go back through time, if you go back to the great cars before the Second World War, all the interiors have fantastic fabrics. They have corduroys, they have velours, they have cloths, all of which grip a bottom, all of which wear with dignity and remind me of great furniture in your house. A leather sofa is, I hate to say it, mostly naff. In your house, you have lovely fabrics and cottons and things like that. Why don't we have them in cars? Can someone help me explain this? Because I'm totally baffled.
Chundering children.
There is that. Manish, you got your finger in the air.
Well, only it's anecdotal. I assumed, I assumed that leather was, the luxury item. It was what you were supposed to always have in any kind of car, and it marked you out from the guys on the right. And years ago, I was very lucky because I met Richard Charlesworth, who worked for Bentley. And Richard's ex-Air Force. He had a lot to do with making sure the Queen drives around in a Bentley rather than a Rolls-Royce right now. And he absolutely shocked me when he said that the interior of the Queen's Bentleys has been and always will be cloth. And it will always be
South of England cloth.
Exactly. And the whole thinking was that back in the whatever century, it was sort of grooms and people who rode on horses and did all that outside work who needed leather because it needed to be sort of bulletproof and weatherproof and so on and so forth. And that the Queen would probably would not, bless her, have been seen dead in a car with leather seats. And so apart from Ed's argument about children throwing up in them, I think you're probably exactly right. Beautiful fabric seats probably are much, much nicer. And I wonder if, can you imagine getting a beautifully bespoke, I don't know, Liberty print in your white Jaguar or something like that? I mean, that would just be stunning, wouldn't it? Pretty lateral, and has got me thinking. So I think this stuff that shrinks over 2 or 3 years in terrible sun, and when your bum's been on it a while, it starts to look like an army boot. You're right. Let's get rid of it. Let's go.
Edward, I only have leather. Lovett. What do you reckon?
I don't only have leather, but I do. I've got the 911 with the houndstooth interior. The dogs jump in the car every day, and when it's raining, I have to sort of prepare myself for them to launch themselves over me because I know if the footprints go on the houndstooth, it's not coming out. So there is a practicality to leather that you can wipe down in an everyday car. But when I was looking yesterday at some of those photos and some of the sort of period 70s and 80s Mercedes with those green velours, they're beautiful.
Gorgeous.
And also things like S4 Stradales with the Alcantara, sort of new, but they're beautiful, as you say. They grip your bum nicely. And actually, I guess if you go all the way back to the 50s in some of the period Ferraris with beautiful brown leather seats, that's one thing. But actually, the ones with corduroy centers, 250 LMs, though with the I don't know what that material is, but that sort of blue fabric material. You're right, Chris. I support you. I'm velour. Let's go.
So I'm with an awful lot of that, and I do think there's something about sort of late 70s and early Mercedes, the W116, the 450 6.9, and they would often be in a sort of a browny metallic, goldy metallic with a brown velour or sort of slightly corduroy, and they look stunning. And it was the case, I think, going back pre-war, Rolls and Bentleys and other coach-built automotive monstrosities, the driver's seat would be upholstered in leather because it was cheaper and easier and more practical. And as you say, HMQ's rear seats and hopefully His Majesty's now will be the same. So it was seen as a luxury item, and that leather was more plentifully available, presumably because of the conventions of time. So, but there are some leather. We like leather car. You can slide in and out of them quite quickly. You can easily. They're quite nice. When they're nice, they smell nice. And that sort of beautiful Ferrari leather, I think, looks really nice. No racing seat ever worked in leather. You just get sweaty and slip around in it like a slippy one, and that's going to be so a nice fabricy, clothy, almost like Velcro. I mean, nobody in a car you want to drive fast would have a leather seat. So I'm 80%, 90% in support of your argument.
I'm not so sure you would. I'm trying to think. Actually, the Grenadier, which I've got coming in 2 weeks' time, I've got on cloth. And there was the option of the leather Recaro. The seats are only Recaro, and but that was another 800 quid or something. And I thought, no, I'm pretending to be real. I'm pretending to be a farmer. I'm going cloth, heated seats, but cloth.
Yeah.
But in general, I'm not so sure you would, if you were ordering a Porsche or a Mercedes, or I think it'd be hard if it was a cloth option that was good, whether you would go for it. I suppose the Alpina cloth really jumps to mind, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The 80s job with the stripes.
But a G Series Carrera was nicer with cloth. So you didn't slide around in it at all.
Yeah, it was nicer. The Club Sports 3.2, as we've talked about before, is probably the best cloth seat ever. And the cord,
Raven something, was it Raven, wasn't it?
Yeah, and there were two actually. There was a lighter one, and then there was the pinstripe. There was the dark, almost corduroy, with the red pinstripe, or there was the very, very subtle check lighter grey. There was, I don't know why there were two cloth.
The lighter grey one wasn't velour; it was more of a cloth.
It was a cloth, yeah.
God, we sound geeky. But the other thing that was mentioned is temperature. If you go to the south of France and you leave your car with a cloth seat uncovered or without anything, you just get in it, get in your ass. You get a leather seat, and you just get second-degree burns at the back of your legs.
Yeah, and I think this is quite an interesting conversation, because it does. Designers of car interiors and seats, we're looking for a bit more imagination and creativity and elegance and beauty in the materials and design. Those Alpina, we're going to come and talk about it in a bit. Those beautiful shield bucket seats that Alpinas have with those I mean, if that was available today, and they're not, if that was available today, that's what you'd have in your Alpina. It's just so cool. So a bit more creativity.
I think in general, people are becoming far more creative, especially with the sports cars and supercars out there. People are becoming far more creative.
I know someone that worked for Aston Martin a decade ago on their interiors, and she was a pretty dynamic individual. She was looking into what they call new technical materials to offer for customers. But ultimately, there's such an association between leather and quality. It's as bad. It's the equivalent of the dynamics argument of firm suspension and maintenance. It's become something that is just a fact now, and you can't get beyond it, and it's such a shame. So if you don't have leather, your vehicle's going to be worth less. But I feel like I owe my late daddy a bit of an apology, because one of the things that I used to rage against was he'd always have his little 3 Series BMWs in total poverty spec. And I used to hate the fact he'd never have leather seats. But looking back, they were much, much cooler.
Smart.
Remember him turning around to me and saying, if I have a leather seat, I just fall out of it when I go round a corner. What's the point? And I was like, you're just being mean. He was bang on.
No, he's right.
That 90s BMW cloth is magic. I mean, I do think the cord of, as you reference, Ed, the 275 cord seats of the Ferrari's 60s car, or the Porsche, a little speedster with a semi-cord seat. I think if cord came back, I'd be right at the front of the queue.
You got cord. So the 911 Touring, they do what they call corduroy. It's not quite cord, but it's a ribbed fabric.
Yeah.
And I had those in my 991. They were great. They were really good. I mean, if anything, in a performance car, the bits that you're going to rub when you get in and out, give those a bit of leather because they'll wear harder.
Yeah.
But the bit you're actually in contact with should be fabric, I think.
I think the
Neil, just on-
Taycan's got a vegan thing, isn't it? There's a vegan cloth on the Taycan.
Yeah.
Neil, you know what I was going to ask? You know about working with fabrics and materials like this. Do you think if people did have cloth seats, are these things easier to repair or re-upholster?
I think there is a warranty and wear and tear issue here.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, if you're trying to give 5 years, 7 years warranty, the last thing you want is a seat to have a big bloody worn patch.
Yeah,
Because
I've got a buddy of mine who ordered one of those Ferrari 70th anniversary cars.
Yes.
And or I say ordered, was probably asked that he suggested he should take it.
yes.
It's got that beautiful, it's got a beautiful, it's a brown leather interior, but it's an incredibly soft hide. It's like touching butter, you know, it's one of those beautiful hides.
Semi-aniline.
Yeah. And he but the paperwork with the car says there's no warranty on this. It will shrink, it's going to do
On the leather, okay.
So he had to pay more money for the car and was told the interior will shit itself and he's on his own.
I was at Pebble Beach 3 or 4 years ago when they were delivering a Singer, a right-hand drive Singer to the owner, and it was a lovely color combination. It was blue on the outside and had orange Alcantara on the inside with their woven leather. And I remember walking up to the car, and I must have been 50 meters away from it, and the door was open, and I could see from 50 meters away on the door, on one little square of the woven interior, that someone had obviously got a tiny bit of muck on there, and they'd tried to clean it. The car's now 4 years old, and every time I see it, you'd have to just retrim the whole door panel. Yeah. That is the issue, and I started by saying children chundering in the cars, but Chris, your car's got the dog jumping in and out of it. They would in the modern day life, in the way some of us use the cars, not perhaps the special cars that we treat slightly differently, but they'd get trashed. You can't rub them, you can't clean them up as easily.
My cars are immaculate, Edward. You know that. They're like
yes. Please have a look at the photo of a Toyota here.
Whatever. Yeah. But I think this is a good conversation. I imagine that the drapers of the world will be beating a path to our door very shortly, because our creativity and expertise and our wide range of views, it's another avenue, Edward, for you to employ us in.
Well, we now want to order a Land Rover with a Land Rover badge on it in cloth.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Green. And
The honourable company of drapers.
Also.
I was about to say the Golf GTI is always launched with a tartan cloth interior.
Exactly.
Well, the Golf doesn't exist anymore.
You're not allowed to talk about golf, Edward. You upset a load of people with that.
Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't here for that. We wouldn't be speaking anymore.
I tell you what, there was a to finish the cloth interior thing. There was a car that wouldn't sell, and it lurked around the Dick Lovett group for ages. A white E46 M3. Remember, it had a cloth interior. You could order an E46 M3 with a cloth interior, and it was so cool. No, about 4 people did in the UK, and there was a white one. That
I bought that car, and it was on 18-inch wheels, manual in white with a standard interior. That was Mark ended up buying that car. That was the perfect spec E46 M3.
And who knew it was the best, because it had a interior. Right, moving on to an even more important issue. This is important. Take it seriously, listeners, because I know my contributors will. And that is there. But what is your favorite Alpina?
Ooh.
Now, I reckon Neil Clifford has spent, I reckon he shut the business down for a day so he can tell this.
I've never owned an Alpina.
What?
Which I know is a surprise.
Someone mute him. Turn him off.
Sinners have earned most.
You've owned everything.
Shit in the world. And I've just changed that. Come at this as a different way, because it would be very easy to talk about the fabulous green B5 or whatever in green with the tan leather. And actually, I decided to talk about the Alpina that I keep looking at, that I will one day buy because I've got the itch like a bad case of 10-year-old eczema, which I do have eczema, actually. So I do know what that feels like. And it's not fun when you're 10 because you can't hold your tennis racket. But back to Alpinas, is the Z4. Now, this is a bit of a loose conversation, But the Z4M Roadster S for 15 grand, and there's always 3 or 4 of them. Unfortunately, they're all bloody black. If there was a blue one, I'd probably have bought it already. I think for 15 grand, I don't think they did the coupe in an Alpina. I've never seen the.
No, they didn't.
They didn't. No, and it wasn't an M. It was a 3.4S, wasn't it?
Yeah. Because actually, that coupe, frankly, is a better looking car than the Roadster. It's a really pretty car, actually. That coupe. But I keep looking at the Z4M Roadster S for 15 grand. And if they weren't all black, I would have one, because I think it's a fabulous little thing. It's a sort of Boxster alternative.
Yeah.
For 15 grand, and magical engine.
Lovely.
Magical bloody engine. Manual. You get the little blue and red.
I don't think that. I think it was auto only. I think
it is. It's all. That's the thing with that. Yeah, it's an auto only. Yeah.
No, it's not.
No, you sure?
No, I've seen manual.
You don't. Yeah, that might just be one with a body kit and some badging on the back.
No, I don't. I think it wasn't the auto only. The Z8.
Well, the Z8.
No, that was
definitely
manual
only auto. No,
Right,
Z8 Alpina was
Z8 Alpina was auto only.
Z8 Alpina was manual.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
Auto. Yeah, it was only auto and Alpina, but I think there is manual Z4 Roadster S. I will check that out.
We'll check that out. Okay, well, he's gone for that. That's an interesting one.
I've gone
Also,
off
for me,
piece there.
it is off piece, and it was. I remember the launch of that car. It sold really well in the UK, and I think it sold. I think the automatic gearbox was the reason why it sold well in the UK, because I think the Z4M Roadster was a manual and was a bit of a handful and was quite edgy. And Alpina came out as ever with the more relaxed alternative, stick it in drive. It still went well. It had a slightly odd Alpina wheel. It had sort of 4 spokes that went up.
It had the multi-parallel spoke. Yeah, I've never liked that one.
But it was interesting. It was an interesting car. I think we had one as a long term or an autocar. Okay, Chris Cooper, what's your Alpina?
So I love Alpina. I really love them.
You could have had a B3 convertible now.
So, okay, let's just deal with that now. So the rest of my colleagues had a lot of entertainment on Sunday evening, watching me comprehensively cock up, bidding for a really lovely B3.3 E46 convertible.
Oh no!
It went actually for the vendor and for you. I think it went for a pretty good price, just slightly more than I wanted to pay for that car. And I had a B3.3 E46 Saloon. Actually, a year before that was a 2000, which I really, really liked. Alpinas they're originally a Dutch family, went to Germany, a number of industrial interests, and Burkhard Bovensiepen, I think that's pronounced about the surname. He very, very keen wine enthusiast. So in fact, I think the vineyards of Alpina will outlast the car company. Probably everyone knows that last year, BMW announced that they're buying, or rather the Bovensiepen family announced they're going to sell the Alpina brand and business to BMW. I think there's 2 or 3 years left to go. And I think the argument is the essence of what Alpina is kind of only really works with internal combustion engine cars. And so where's it going to go? So they said, okay, that we're going to plan our exit. And I think the brand will continue, but what we know as an Alpina probably won't. So
German, Chris, isn't it? Just the concept that they're looking into the crystal ball, they're just going to plan it.
It's very
amazing.
I mean,
Probably sensible.
I mean, Monkey, you've met Andy Bovensiepen probably more than I have. He's sort of about our age. He now runs a business. He's very, very good driver, very, very good racer. I think he won the Nürburgring 24-hour race. He's proper peddler.
He won it in a diesel.
In a diesel.
Yeah, an E36 diesel.
So to answer the question, the first one that I remember thinking, what is that, was B9 3.5, early 80s, with those wonderful interior, we talked about it earlier, those wonderful interior colors. B9 3.5 was manual. I think 60 odd came to the UK, quite a few stood around. JK had one, didn't he? I think it was sold a couple of years ago that looked really, really lovely. The E38, again, sorry about this. At Bicester, it's so many different things there. At Bicester on Sunday, somebody had a beautiful E38 B7, V12. It's a V12 version.
How
not-
many are you going to reel off here? You're only allowed to choose one.
I've got to wait there. An E38 is a B12, not a B7.
Sorry, B12. It was a B. It says. Did it say it's a B7 or B12?
No, it'll say B12 5.7 on the
Right.
back.
Yeah.
You're right. Well done for paying attention to the back. It was B12, 7 Series B12. That was stunning. But actually, my favorite is a current one because I think it's just the epitome and the essence of Alpina, and it won't be around forever. The B3.3 Touring.
Yeah.
I think. In fact, I might just go and order one for when
Let's
they
go
run
get
out.
one.
So B3.3 Alpina Touring, clear glass, green. These days, without the decals down the side, doesn't quite work these days. Did work in the older ones. Absolutely wonderful car. All the car you ever need.
How many will they make, Chris?
The B3 Touring, they'll probably make. They each have a little plaque. You probably know this little plaque with which one it is. And I've never seen any of them with more than hundreds, not thousands. So
Yeah.
I think because there's now an M3 Touring, that will hit the numbers massively. So it'll
but
be a rare car.
they're so. I mean, if you like the B3.3 Touring, you look at the M3 Touring and think, "What's that?" I would.
I'd like to put in a small request. If anyone from Alpina is listening to this podcast, please can you improve your website?
Oh,
Yeah.
Because
shocking.
the configurator is literally designed in 1997 and hasn't been upgraded.
yeah.
You
And I'd
mean
love
like
to
our
go
video
on there
call?
and play around, but you can't. Basically, it's like written MS-DOS.
You see, you
Alpina
do
for
know
dummies.
about technology. It's all a lie.
It's Windows 3.11.
He's got it all.
Yes, I was a computer salesman once.
And now
Right,
you know. I mean, why is that? That's not a surprise.
It all comes out.
Edward Lovett, and we're not going to talk about the bloody B5, which comes
I've got
So
that
what-
written down, but
what's
that's
your
not my
favourite
choice.
Alpina.
So I've got a funny relationship with Alpina, and I'll tell you why. And it. Chris obviously just talked about the wine connection with Alpina, but I used to go to the Geneva Motor Show with my father when I was a young chap, and we were one of a few Alpina dealers in the UK. Bristol was one of our dealerships, and Bernard Bovensiepen at the time gave us a bottle opener, which
Lovely.
my family home out in the Cotswolds, whenever we need to open a bottle of wine, you always go to the same place in the kitchen to get the bottle opener. And it's the same bottle opener we've used as a family to open every bottle of wine in the house since my father was given that. And I'm guessing that was probably 20 years ago now. So I have this funny relationship.
That's a brilliant story. I love that.
And actually, it was probably Alpina that got me introduced to Chris, because we had a 5 Series, probably green Chris, 3.3, 5 Series estate Alpina with the decals down the side, which Chris came in and bought on behalf or for his mother. And that's right, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it was silver.
Yeah,
Wasn't-
silver.
Didn't get much of a deal. You had my bloody trousers down.
Yeah. Anyway, that was
like
your
fucking
mother's
Scott
daily
Wayne.
driver, and it was brilliant. But Sytner ended up taking the Alpina franchise for the UK and ended up selling it out of 1 or 2 of their dealerships, which I thought was a real shame. And to be honest with you, quite frankly, as a family, we kind of lost the connection with Alpina. I was never going to be driving around in Alpinas. Funny enough, my father's actually just bought one of those B3s as his everyday car, which I think he just went on to Auto Trader, which I'm not sure would have pained him or not, but went on to Auto Trader, onto the Sytner website, and bought one off his competitors because that's who had it for sale. Yeah. In terms of the cars themselves, it's a Jägermeister 3-litre CSL Batmobile BMW Alpina.
That's cool. That's very
I know that's not a road car, and I could give you lots of reasons why individual road cars were cool, but I just think that particular car, and it was at an event at Silverstone last year when I was there, Patrick Blakeney Edwards was pedaling it around Silverstone. Sounds bloody brilliant. It's a very, very quick car.
The orange one.
The orange one. And I well, just to touch on one final thing, which without naming a car, what they've done. I think you talked about this, Chris, last week or the week before with BMW, how, the SE doesn't look great. So it means everyone chooses the BMW M. But Alpina did this great thing with a tiny, simple lip spoiler, some very simple exhausts on the back, and some side sills probably, and a steering wheel and some stitching on the seats that made an SE look so much better than an M Sport.
Exactly. I totally agree.
Yeah, and things like the Z4 that you mentioned, which looked okay as a normal BMW car, but just a couple little design tweaks from Alpina made it look like a totally different package.
Yeah.
But Manish, you probably sitting there on Sunday when I was setting this out saying, what is an Alpina?
No. No. Auntie Google solved all of those problems.
Yes. It's all right. You get your chance to make us look silly in a minute on F1. You're the man. Carry on.
No. But what I actually found enormously enjoyable about this particular little section is just Edward having two interesting relationships with ... I want to know how many bottles of wine you think that is, Edward. 20 years, you've got this lightweight alloy, presumably beautiful Alpina thing with a little go faster stripe and a little badge, and there are only 8 of them in the world.
Quite a lot. The actual screw's a little bit bent now as well, which is very frustrating, so it doesn't shut perfectly.
You need to send it back.
I mean, we're all very tempted on this new B5 GT, aren't we? There's one of 50.
A lot of money though, boss.
A lot of money.
150.
Really?
Yeah, M5. There's no way it's better than an M5 CS. It's not possible. There isn't a better car.
Yeah.
£150,000.
Actual pounds. Yeah.
Manish, tell us what your favorite Alpina is.
Favorite Alpina. BMW B7 Turbo, the E24 one. Turbo Coupe 182. So pretty. And I think
that's a good call.
The very last of those, 300 and something horsepower, and they had a variable boost.
And everyone thought the B10 by Turbo in the E34 shape was the craziest thing they've made. But that car was like 7 years before, and it wasn't far off on power because Alpina turbocharged a lot more than people thought in the early 80s.
They did.
That's a great shout, Manish.
That was a 6 Series shape one, wasn't it? The Sharknado 6 Series.
They did the 7 Series as well. With that.
But the 6 Series, that's a very good call. Yeah.
Okay. Like and they had one at the Frankfurt Motor Show in green with a tan interior about 10 years ago when they were launching the new B6, I think, or B8.
Yeah. So just on the Alpina, so obviously, Edward, on your side at the moment, there is a 2016 B7, so the 7 Series with the twin turbo V8. And that will come to fruition next weekend, this coming weekend.
Hold on, caller.
So I think it's Sunday or Monday. Anyway, so I'm saying everyone can watch that and me not into that one as very well either.
I don't think you should be buying that one. There she is. That's she is. That's got a story that thing has.
Yeah.
Right. I'll just I don't know where to start with Alpina. I adore the thing.
There's D3 for you there as well.
Not my thing.
That's a fake Alpina, really. I don't know where to start with the Alpina thing. I don't want to spoil Edward's sense of feeling that he's got an object of some value, but I have the same bottle opener. That's probably a shattering revelation, but I do have one. I went to my first Alpina event was for the D10. So people forget that Alpina were all pioneers. The B10 was already an E39 5 Series selling well, and they put in the world's first high performance diesel engine in this car, 240 horsepower, unheard of then. It was 100 more than just about any other diesel. And the thing would run to 160 miles an hour. And they launched it at the Geneva Motor Show at Devon-les-Bains. You went over the border. So I blagged a Volvo from a press trip, and I went over the border to go to this place. And I'd never met Mr. Burkhard Bovens even before. I'd never met anything to do with him. They had a chateau. They had a B10, a D10 outside. We went in, had lunch, and Mr. Bovenzeepen just gave you some of their Alpina wines. I got it a bit wrong because I just loved it. I got to meet the Bovenzeepen family. They talked about the cars. I could demonstrate that I was a nerd about all the history. They fed me wine. I drank too much wine. I couldn't drive back to Geneva to the motor show. I'd stolen this Volvo from a press junket. I got myself in so much shit. Anyhow, I dumped the Volvo. I managed to get a taxi back, which cost, I could have bought a car for that. I then tried to bill Haymarket for that. It was an utter mess. But I did get that bottle opener that Lovett's got, and I have got it at
Brilliant.
home.
Brilliant.
So I'd say my favorite Alpinas are B12. I've got a thing about the E38 B12 saloons.
Yeah.
Now. We nearly nabbed one for collecting cars, that black thing that was doing the rounds. I'd have bought that. What a car that is. Just ex-Sultan of Brunei. What a story. And they just, that E38 shape with the big Alpina 20-inch rim, to me, they just set each other off perfectly. But there is one particular car, B10s as well. I had lots of B10s, love those, B10 Tourings. But I think if you go back mid-80s, car called the B6 3.5. So you take an E30 3 Series, narrow body.
Yes,
And you
remember
put a 3.5 litre engine from a 535i in it with a locking diff, black with gold stripes and with the green and blue seats inside. 250 horsepower, didn't weigh much. They did a thing called the B6 3.5S, which was an E30 M3
with that engine. Yeah.
But that engine was a bit heavy, and I don't think they handled that well. I've never driven one of those, but a B6 3.5 manual, if you've got one out there, bloody phone Edward Lovett now, and he will buy it for me as my birthday present for next year.
How many of those were they made?
Not many, couple of hundred.
How much do you reckon?
40 grand. There are people who want 60 grand, 70 grand for them, but it's probably a 40,000 pound car.
I had 50 quid for your birthday.
Yeah. Think again.
Yeah.
We're with you, monkey.
No, thank you very much. So, all right, that was a very enjoyable section on.
That was great
on Alpina. I thoroughly enjoyed that. We might have to come back and do what's your second favorite Alpina.
Oh, yes, please.
Let's move on to a bit of F1 chit chat. Is there anything on your mind this week, Manish? I've got a few things on my mind, particularly with regards to Mercedes structure, but I know you'll have a few things to say. Carry on.
No, so the main thing on my mind is an article again in the race yesterday about the kind of quote unquote failure of succession planning at Mercedes, because there's been a little job switch, and Ferrari refugee James Allison's back in charge. And that's not really what the article was about. The article was about, the subject is quite simple. Have Mercedes had it too easy for too long? And now they've actually got some competition. Now they can't just rely on the fact that they've got the best engine and an infinite budget. Is Toto Wolff looking a little bit mortal? And I think in 2020, he had a chance to walk away and he decided not to. This is a great big challenge. And I have to say, they are looking a little bit mortal. And I think, what I always loved about Formula One was, at the end of the day, it's a lovely quote from Frank Williams when he was really dominating in 1992. And he said, people are sort of criticizing Williams for dominating, but I remind people that no one dominates in Formula One for very long. So we kind of enjoy it. And in those days, you did get these lovely kind of tidal movements. When Senna and Prost were really kicking ass in the late 80s, no one thought Williams was going to come along in the early 90s and dethrone them. And then no one thought that Benetton was going to come and dethrone them. And then, we went back to Williams for a little bit. But this big, long Mercedes run has not been something that I've really enjoyed, because it has been, for me, a bit of a, kind of a one-horse trick. You've got this spectacular change in the engine rules, and we had a winning car, and now we've had a change in the rules again. And in our WhatsApp chat last night, I found somebody took a photo of 1/18th scale Formula One cars. You just see how big they become. It's we'll post it on this, I hope. And it is an aero formula. These are much bigger cars, and it is funny to see Mercedes struggling so much that they had this kind of long-term plan, and it's all kind of come undone again. And the question is, James Allison turn this around, and how quickly with the cost cap? So I'm sorry I sort of bang on about this all the time, but we've got 5 races in the next 6 weeks, and you can quickly see a scenario where, what if Max wins the next 3? Do you think anyone's going to watch races sort of 4 and 5? It's funny that we found ourselves here. I guess that's my story.
Isn't it interesting that I agree with you, and I noticed that I've got a Times app that I use for most of my news, and I look at the other sites that are free, and there's a total lack of Formula One news in this gap period. It isn't resonating. It isn't competing with football. In 21, it was. In 21, when there wasn't a race on, there'd be 2 or 3 speculative editorials. There'd be an interview with someone from a team. They wanted to make sure that they knew that Formula One was being reported on outside of the races. It isn't hitting the general media the way it was. Whether they're being clever and they've worked out they'd rather be on social media and have a lot of representation on Instagram and TikTok and other places, I don't know. I'm not getting an awful lot surfaced or thrown at me on Instagram at the moment. No. Either if I am, it's Daniel Ricciardo racing a cow or something in a car, which seems to be utterly demeaning to me. So yeah, it is interesting.
Why have we got this month gap? I don't understand why.
China was cancelled.
China was cancelled. So what we were supposed to have was China 2 weeks before Baku, but they cancelled China very, very late. And just
to answer what Manish said there, which about domination, and I think we saw this with Sebastian Loeb when he won 9 on the trot in rallying. It's difficult for a sport to survive dominance. It's a sad paradox of sport. If someone dominates too long, people lose interest. But strangely, I think I had the same with tennis as well. When Federer was winning everything on his own, or Sampras on his own, you needed a great rivalry. At least in tennis, they'd go head to head, and there would be some variation in outcome. But isn't it true that the one thing that's consistent about Formula One is if you've got one of the 2 or 3 best drivers, and you've got the best car designer, they're going to win. That is true throughout history. And that isn't changeable, and we're just seeing that at the moment, aren't we? It just so happened that Mercedes designed the best powertrain and dropped it in a car that was fine and had the best driver at the time. Red Bull, I think you could argue their technical achievement at the moment might be greater because they've got a great powertrain, and clearly Adrian's done something with the underside of that Red Bull that no one else can work out.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it's a natural rhythm of. Once you're ahead, it's really hard for other people to, let's go back to the factory and design a few more bits and put it on like you could have done in the 70s or 80s, possibly even the 90s. Now it's far too complicated because the margins and the modeling that's going on and the margins of incremental gain are so small that you can't just throw, particularly with the cost cap, you can't throw performance at it. In that article, one related to it, Manish, I saw there was some, Jodie Eggington, AlphaTauri technical director, was saying, our biggest concern is we build bits that we don't use because that buggers up the cost cap. And if we don't build enough of the bit and we go to a race like Baku, is there a sprint race this weekend? It's a standalone sprint that doesn't determine the grid order for the Grand Prix. Quali itself will do that. It's a new experiment. And some of the teams are worried that it will, well, the idea is it will encourage drivers to, drivers don't need encouragement to win races. They just want to win races. At least that's what I did, Monkey. I don't know what held you back. You may have had a different view, but when I won my races, that's because I wanted to win races. Anyway, sorry, where was I? So, but more importantly, the big story, the big F1 story that has definitely been on social media, Fernando Alonso and Taylor Swift.
That's right, yes. My wife couldn't believe it.
Is that serious? I thought that was a joke.
It's a headline writer's. No. It's a headline writer's dream. It's, whenever Taylor Swift's going out with somebody, there's like they concatenate. That means add together, Monkey. They concatenate sort of part of the name of Taylor Swift. So when she was going out with Tom Hiddleston, it was Hiddle Swift. It's just wonderful. SwiftAlonso I mean, he must be loving it.
So
That
is
was
this
the
why
first
he's
thing
been
that-
so happy? It's not to do anything with the racing
is this
car.
real? Is this real?
Who
Is
cares?
this real?
Who
Is this
cares?
real?
It's
Can't be real.
fantastic.
Oh, God.
Is
It's
it
a,
I
real?
think
it's
there's
a
a whiff
rumor
of
that
it.
my son raised, and then my wife zoomed off to Google it as soon as possible. No, it can't be. He's married.
No, he's not married. He had a
No.
long-term girlfriend
No,
that he's just
yeah.
split from. He definitely has. I mean, God, we sound like Hello Magazine or worse, but
Great.
that's just a brilliant story.
Nando having a dip in the Swift. I never thought I'd hear it. Well, fair play to you, Fernando. That, I mean, not only how quick you are, but you clearly have honed your
Yeah.
digit skills.
Just, did you
Right.
see in the Times? Sorry, last week they had a little quiz, and it was you had couplets from either Taylor Swift or William Shakespeare, and you had to guess which or which, right? And some Oxford Don has said basically she is the modern Shakespeare, because he had a crack at this, and then he got about half right. And you should have a look, Google this. I had to go. I thought, come on, like that. But actually,
That's
really
brilliant.
not.
That's
Are you
brilliant.
saying that if I said to you, Manish, shall I compare thee to Fernando's cock, you wouldn't work out where it'd come from?
No, we know that's you.
That sounds
we do
pretty Elizabethan to me, actually. I don't know.
I had dinner with someone in Miami that knows Lewis quite well. And he said that the Mercedes team are pretty confident that they will be on the podium every race for the rest of the season. And I think Lewis will win this weekend. So there's a little bet.
Wow. That's a bold statement.
I don't think this Red Bull thing is quite a done deal yet. I think Mercedes, Toto, I think they're all a bit smarter. They're desperate to prove that was not a one-off car. And I think they'll be working their asses off, and I don't think it's finished.
I'll
Always
put
one.
Monkey's 50 quid birthday present for on that with you, Neil. So that might then go to 100 quid, which will move me a little bit closer to his B6.
Oh, I
Yeah.
think you're going to get better odds than than
you would.
that on Lewis
Okay.
winning in Baku.
Yeah.
How they're going to turn around the DRS performance of that bloody Red Bull. I mean, it just looks like a bar of soap when he opens the back wing, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Anyhow, I love it when Neil's right, and I want him to be even more right this time.
Thank you.
Moving on. This is a random one. I just thought of it. It would be quite good fun. So, this is not an in-depth discussion about how car chases are made in films, but I want to ask, what is your favorite car in a film? It could just be a cameo. It could be a central role. It could be the fact that you still love Herbie Goes Bananas. I don't know what it is. Manish, what's your favorite car in a film?
I was going to go really obviously because I love the Lamborghini Mura so much. It would have been so easy to say the beginning of the Italian Job, and it is such a beautiful beginning. But for you film buffs, I really thought about where the car's character, apart from Herbie, is absolutely essential to storytelling. And in my opinion, it's actually Roger Moore's best ever film. It's made in 1971, or it came out in 1971. And it's a film called The Man Who Haunted Himself.
Rover.
What a great film.
It was a great film. It's not the Rover, it's the Lamborghini Islero.
Oh,
Yes, that makes it. So, just in a nutshell, there's a bloke called Pelham. He's a little bit
Yes.
boring, and he's into marine engineering, and he's a real bowler hat wearing, very sort of, mustachioed, dull businessman, the early 70s. And something happens to him while he's driving his Rover. He suddenly starts to almost race himself, and he has this massive accident. When he's on the operating theatre table, suddenly his heart stops. And then when they get his heart started again, there are 2 ECGs and not 1. And they think, what's gone wrong? What's gone wrong? And anyway, they manage to get him back from that. And he goes back to work, but there's he has this feeling that there's a doppelganger, because everywhere he goes to work, people have seen him, but not him, a kind of slightly more caddish him.
yeah,
And when
very.
he starts looking out of his window of his home, occasionally he sees the front of this beautiful silver Lamborghini Islero. And it is the exact opposite car to everything that he is. And I'm not going to bore you, or rather spoil the end of the film, because I think it's really worth seeing. But this car, in a way, it's everything. And right at the end, it's this car that chases him and causes him to to have a certain thing happen to him that makes him whole again. And I think the whole film is about British uptightness and it's schizophrenia, and it's now 1970, it's not the 60s anymore. And who are we? Are we these uptight people who wear pinstripe shirts and pinstripe suits and bowler hats? Or do we wear pink shirts and paisley ties? And do we love Lamborghinis or do we love Rovers? It's such a great film. And this Lamborghini is integral to this movie. And I've never seen one in a film before, and I've never seen one in a film since. And I found out today it sold a couple of years ago for £268,000.
Wow.
So it's a hell of
Steal.
a car.
Edward's
Steal.
Googling his Lero at the moment. I can see him.
Yeah.
That's a lovely explanation. And also, it reminds me, because I was watching a bit of The Persuaders the other day, for the first couple of episodes, that Roger Moore, besides having the greatest eyebrows and the most expressive eyebrows in history, just loved dressing up. He loved dressing, didn't he? And he loved colour. He was everything.
Have you seen in The Persuaders, Chris? At the end, it says clothes by Roger Moore.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
And actually, now I'm thinking about it, even though it's not a film, that beige DBS inline 6 in The Persuaders is worth a shout.
Goldie one. Yeah. I saw that was one of those car fairs down in Cornwall near where I live. That very Goldie DBS, lovely. Yeah.
Neil Clifford's hopping about on I can see one cheek leaping to another. So he wants to tell us what he wants to tell us. Come on.
well, this is turning into a bit of a film review, hopefully. There's a movie called On Any Sunday.
Oh,
movie. I'm sure we've all seen it, but if you haven't seen it, please go and buy the
Mert.
And Malcolm Smith, and these amazing. I mean, as we all know, I'm an optimist. I think the future's always better. But you know what? I'd have loved to live in California in the late 60s, early 70s. Everyone was handsome. The sky was always blue. No one was fat. They had beautiful clothing, the colors, and the free-spiritedness of it all. And this is about Steve McQueen and his love of motorbikes and the journey that he made of, you know, he did his films for his work because he happened to be a decent-ish actor and he was so handsome that everyone wanted it. But his thing was riding motorbikes, riding bull taco 400s across the desert. So this movie is wonderful. Please, everyone should see it. But the car in it, actually, it's not really a car, it's a van. There's this guy called Malcolm Smith, and how he travels with his mates across America in the back of this Ford sort of camper stroke pickup van with their motorbikes. They sleep in the back, they park in the desert, they light a fire, they cook their dinner, they make some coffee, and they just have this wonderful, free-spirited, no ties life, which I think if we all live, a lot of us live in a corporate world, and, you know, we've all got mortgages and kids and worries and anxiety and shit. And these guys were just driving around America in the back of a van with two motorbikes, having the most incredible time. And I think we do have to talk about camper vans and escaping more. That has to be a subject at some point, because that feeling of just being in the desert and no one, there's before mobile phones, before GPS and fucking Waze and all this stuff. No one knew where you were. And you were just sat there having a coffee with your mate and having a sausage sandwich at midnight. Fantastic. And that's, we all yearn for that a little bit. I do anyway.
Bruce Brown made that film, and he's far better known for his surf documentaries, which were called Endless Summer. But actually, this is a much better piece of work, I think. And the soundtrack, if you look it up, the soundtrack is off the scale. And also, we have to acknowledge this: the little boy doing the wheelie at the beginning.
Yeah,
it's just such a gorgeous moment. He's got so much control. He's just altering the pitch of the wheelie with his arse on the seat. And it's just being tracked clearly from the back of probably Malcolm's van, isn't it? It's what it looks like.
It's like a little rally chipper. You know, there's a smaller version of the Grifter in red.
I watch that once a month. I watch it. It's a glorious.
Or anyone that comes anywhere near my man cave at home, it's always on. So I just switch the telly on, get my CD remote and press play, and there it is. And it's playing.
And you can hear and also that'll get you into flat track with the metal shoe. Wow. You can, you know, there's a flat track school in California. You can go and learn to flat track.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That I'm now super excited. Chris Cooper, what's next?
So that late 60s, we've all seen the film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yep.
Haven't we? Quentin Tarantino film. It's a really interesting story, and because clearly at the end of it, most people have seen it. It changes history. Sharon Tate isn't killed by the Charlie Manson gang, and they all live happily ever after and so forth. But that feel and that vibe in that movie was just so wonderful. So yeah, I like you, Neil. I could go back to that. So I've got an obvious one and a really weird one. The obvious one is I found No Time to Die really emotional because I didn't expect him to die.
Yes.
And in that last scene where his girlfriend and their daughter were driving that same, and the lines that V8 Vantage was carving through, proper lines that we would look at and say, that's a nice line. Just gently tipping it in, letting it load, squeezing it, and just feeling that bit where you want to, just wonderful. And from the helicopter shots is wonderful. So that Aston Martin V8 Vantage, when she ends with that line, his name was Bond, James Bond, that was just, it summed up that wonderful sort of feeling. The other one's a bit weird, but I think I really enjoyed it at the time. Some of you will have seen that really interesting, it's a bit nerdy, that Porsche series about Michael Fassbender, the actor, going to Le Mans, Road to Le Mans. Really, really interesting. It's on YouTube, all on YouTube. It's beautifully made, really interesting. It's not it's beautifully made, but it's quite raw. It's quite honest, particularly for Michael Fassbender when he actually gets to Le Mans. So I was thinking about some of the films that he'd been in, and he was in a not great film. Sorry, Michael, a not great film in 2017 called The Snowman, which was about a policeman, I think in Sweden, with a few problems, mental health, alcohol problems with
all these Swedish movies.
I was going to say, Manish, how hard is it to get into the movie writing business? I look at this stuff, but the best bit about that film for me, he had a sort of an orangey G-Wagon, clear glass, not glitzy, a practical workmanlike. God, it just looks so cool. I could watch that film again for the orange Geländewagen. It was brilliant. So those are my two.
Like the fact a G-Wagon lures you into a film. Edward Lovett, how do you follow that, given you have got several G-Wagons?
Well, firstly, I'm pleased you said Bond, because we are so lucky to have Bond. Yeah. And for car people, every movie resonates because of the car. And actually, when I was looking at other movies, most movies have some sort of car connotation in there somewhere in the movie. And that's the bit that I remember. But I'm going to show you a picture because I'm not a movie star. I can't.
No, I won't hear that.
I can't go back to Hollywood in the 50s or 60s and be that. But one thing we could all do, we could actually replicate this. We are in control of this.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, okay.
We could go and do the cannonball run quietly, obviously. Don't tell anyone we're going to do it, and race from one side of America to the other. Would I want to be in the Daytona giving white silk scarves out to beautiful ladies that drive past and then pull another white silk scarf out once you've given the one across? Or would I like to be in the Cobra? One of those. I don't mind.
That's brilliant. I really love that. It's a great idea. We've got to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, that would end really well, that would. Can you
imagine? What a way to go.
Yeah. I could also imagine me being Ferris Bueller, but I wouldn't be winding the mileage back and putting it into the ditch outside the house. I would have just crashed it on the way into town.
Yeah. I looked a bit like the car parking attendant that went and jumped it off the bloody road, didn't I? Yeah.
Well, the one who goes, a whole $5.
So I don't know. I'd like you guys to know where to start with this. So actually, I thought it's a bit like Desert Island This. Does one use this as a forum to demonstrate how much you know about alternative film and how windswept and interesting you are, and just how broad your interests are? Or do you just be honest about the fact that when you were younger, there was a film that really got you, and the car's a bit shameful now, but every time you see it, it gives you a massive lump in your throat? And for me, it's Rocky Balboa, Lamborghini Jalpa in the tunnel, Rocky 4, and he's singing.
yes, I
There's
remember
Robert
that.
Tepper's "There's No Easy Way Out." Apollo's just died. If I put it on the telly now, I'll probably be crying because for me, I don't even want a Jalpa. I don't even get it. But it's open gated. It's Sly wearing that Adidas bloody tracksuit with the Italian colours on it, and I love the song. And for me, just they captured the noise of the car as well. Every time I see it, it's the coolest car in any film. I don't even want one. A Lamborghini Jalpa.
The
Quite
Alpa.
like one of those. That's a good
Can I
car.
just
I
say,
think
I
they're
think there
cool.
was a Lamborghini Jalpa it was driven by, what was the thing with the Colbys? It was the spin-off of Dynasty. But the point is
Oh.
that
It's called the
one of the
Colbys.
guys, I think his name was Jeff, who had a Lamborghini Jalpa.
Did he?
Or a Silhouette. I can't remember which of the two, but he
Yeah.
had one.
I think it'd been a Halpa. Yeah.
Silhouette came after it, didn't it? It's the same car, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just can't
Yeah.
remember which of the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, there's a you always think when you watch Rocky 4, there's a bloody Countach parked in front of it. If you're going to go out and have a rip to say goodbye to your mate that just died, why would you take the 8 when there's a 12? You just wouldn't do it, would you? Now,
It's very funny that Lamborghini comes up a lot more in our emotional connection than Ferrari. Maybe we're a bit embarrassed to say Ferrari, but Lamborghini has something, doesn't it, as a brand?
I think also, I was reading about the Persuaders a while back about them trying to score a Dino for the film or for the show. And Aston Martin quite happy to give them a car. Apparently, to get hold of that Dino was an absolute ball ache. They started out thinking, should they buy one? You see it's on Prova plates, so I think it's on a Modena plate, but definitely it's a development plate. So I think actually for a while, Enzo wasn't happy giving cars out to films. So that's why the Ferruccio was giving out a load more cars. He thought, well, this is free marketing.
Yes.
There must be a Ferrari in there. I think that there was a dearth of Ferraris in films.
There was a bit of a story on Aston with the DB5, wasn't there? Wasn't that supposed to be something else? I can't remember. Obviously,
yeah.
he drove a Bentley in real life in the books. Obviously, I haven't read the bloody books, but I think there was a deal with something else, and then that fell through, maybe Jaguar or something, and then he took an Aston.
We will have it. We'll have someone clever who's listening confirm.
Yeah.
Now, we ought to move on to our two-car garage because we're definitely running over a bit here. I apologise. So, the two-car garage this week. I'll read it out. I don't know who this was written by. You are a socially awkward man who has been contributing to a motoring podcast alongside some other people with similar issues. You have £35,000 to spend on a convertible with vaguely usable rear seats. And because this bit is called the two-car garage, you'd better have another £15,000 to spend on a hatchback that is both hot and was built between 1985 and 1991. I'm going to go first with Edward Lovett.
I'm very proud of my choices this week.
I think everyone is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you know, this podcast is sponsored by collectingcars.com. And if you venture
Really?
onto the website and check out the sold section, from now on, most of our two-car garages will have to come from the sold section of Collecting Cars. Now, the reason I say this is one of the things when we started Collecting Cars is that I didn't really think it would work quite like this, but I can see it. And when we went up to Bicester at the weekend and you sort of arrive with sort of a random group of people, that certain cars clearly resonate from time to time. And we end up talking amongst ourselves. They might be cheap, they might be expensive. And you're either asking someone to talk you into buying it or talk you out of buying it. So the two seat with two rear seat cars for your budget, Christopher, because you're the socially awkward person that came up with this this theme this week, was a car that Chris Cooper asked us about a week ago to say, am I mad to be looking at this car? And I had 4 people that week say to me, I'm looking at a car on your website that's ending this weekend. And it was all the same car. And it was the very pretty green DB9 Volante, which sold a little bit over. It sold for £36,250. But I think that's a beautiful car.
Right.
I couldn't care less about the gearbox or that Chris Harris talked you out of it and told you to buy an M6 Cabriolet. But that's where my 35,000 and a bit has gone. And then the hot hatch, Chris, did you say what era it had to be from? You did it.
85 to 91.
85.
I couldn't have been more specific, Edward. And if you ignored that, then
No, I didn't ignore it. I didn't know if you just said it then. I'm very proud of this, and I'm sure you're going to abuse me. It's a Nissan Pulsar GTI R.
Nice, good car.
Yeah, that's. I don't know how you get on 15k though.
You
Must be more than that.
haven't got enough money though, have you?
Yeah, I'm not sure he can pay for it.
Yeah, but it's 1990.
It also brings in
Maybe.
one of the great arguments, that is, can a hot hatch be a hot hatch if it's four-wheel drive from that era? I think of that as a rally homologation special. A hot hatch, by definition, back then was two-wheel drive.
Yeah.
It was
You
a
didn't
bypass.
say that.
No, you can have it, Edward, because
Yeah,
because you're Edward Lovett, and no one says no to you. Right, off we go. Neil Clifford.
Well, being dyslexic, I didn't really read it properly. And I've only spent 35 grand. So I've got 15 grand to spend on driving shoes. I'm spending 15 grand, 35 grand, sorry. Look, the 4-seater cabriolet is a niche that is so wonderful, particularly in manual. I think, we've all done the Mercs, we've all done the E320 Sport line. I know Chris has got one. I even had an E36 that was so fucking underwhelming. So I think you've got to have manual, really. I've gone classic, and they're really hard to find these because they've all been sort of ruined in Slough, to be honest. But the E30 325 Motorsport in Macau blue with the bubble leather.
Oh, no, cloth.
Right. No, I'd go bubble leather. I don't know why, because it was that special motorsport thing with hard top, from factory. You found the one guy that has kept it from new. It's got the original dealer plates. The air conditioning still bloody works. I mean, this car doesn't exist because I've been looking for it for about 12 years. But it's a wonderful thing. That engine, as we've talked about before, is fabulous. It's much better than the E30 M3 engine. It's got so much torque. It's got a lovely noise. You can fit your kids in the back as long as they're under 3, or even better, just your dog, and leave your kids at home. And it's a wonderful thing. And it's the prettiest 4-seater modern cabriolet. Okay, you go back to 60s Mercedes, that's a different thing. And then I think that's 20 grand, be it that that car doesn't exist, because it probably isn't 20
Bit more than that now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit more. Of course it is. And I've gone and bought a Renault Clio Williams, obviously the first series.
Yeah.
With the numbered plate as opposed to the blaggy one that they then made loads because it's
Before they pissed everybody off. Yeah.
It's got velour. It's got the blue dials copied from Alpina. It's got this lovely little dial that clicks over on the oil pressure and goes back to 0. So it's maybe not quite a 205 1.9 GTI, really, but it's super cool. And it's blue. It's got the gold wheels. And everyone comes up and says, because I have owned one of these, is that a Series 1? And you say, of course it is.
Is there another kind?
Yes, because I don't have power steering. Surely you know everything about this car. And that's what you do. And no ABS, actually, I think.
Yeah, probably
How
not.
much is that car? How much is that car, Neil?
15.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's probably a bit more, but don't forget he saved that and he had another 15.
Yeah.
So actually he had 30 to buy that Willie, and I suspect it wouldn't be far off that. I reckon a good Series 1.
Could be.
One did go for 22 on collectingcars.com.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I bought it. so I do know they are actually more than 15 grand.
That was Jason? That was Jason's car, wasn't it?
Well, I bought it just because Jason is such a lovely man and needed the money.
Oh God, this is all too nice. Manish, what's your 2-car garage going to be?
Well, I'm going to go for a 1985 Ferrari shitbox. I'm going for I found one for $40,000 on an American website, but it's the Mondial 3.2 Cabriolet. And have you ever seen the pictures of the Pope when he went to Maranello? That is the car that he stands in the back of. No one says they're good.
Manish, you might be a bit late to this, but 2 years ago, I persuaded Edwards to buy one from Collecting Cars. I still have it. We're still restoring it. Because when I stood in it, my foot went through the floor. It's had to have a whole new floor put on it. And the individual that's restoring it for me is having a little break from his working life at the moment. So it's just sitting in my shed. And I'm already $8,000 into it, and I think we paid 20 something. So but it is a genuine 4-seater, mate. It's a 4-seater.
Yeah.
Chris said you can get your feet into the back, and I don't know if it'll run. And then this is a little bit boring, but I have to say, when they first came out, it turned my head on the road every time, especially when they came like classic black cloth seats. But it was the Mark II Volkswagen Golf GTI 16 valve.
Nice.
I
Two
think
doors?
that's just classic car.
Yeah. Hard to go wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Chris
Classic.
Cooper.
So I have also got that green DB9 Volante on my list that went for 36k, and
Good man.
that was a lot of, I mean, as Neil, you said when we were going through it, name me another 4-seat V12 convertible for that money, and there isn't one. So I kind of kicked myself a bit about that. And then we talked earlier about the B3.3 Cabriolet, which I cocked up as well. So, and the other one, and this is, I nearly bought one of these in period, Maserati Grand Cabrio.
Oh,
That's good.
They're down now at 35, 36k. I mean, they're a bit rubbish. Lovely engine. They look great, and they've got proper 4 seats. Wonderful. So there's a lot you could do for 35k for that. There was a 325 convertible that JK, a garage, was selling it. It was grey,
Grey with red.
grey with red, non-motorsport. Oh, I wish I'd gone, but that was about 35.
Yeah, it's a good car, that.
That was a lovely one.
No mileage.
Hatchback. Did you know in the 1989 World Rally Championship, because that was not long after Group B had gone, so it was a Group A and Group N championship, there were 13 rounds, one of which was the Ivory Coast in English. The winner, the overall winner of the 1989 Ivory Coast WRC round was a Renault 5 GT Turbo.
Oh.
That's what I'd have. If I couldn't find one I liked, then you go for the 720 kilogram. It's made literally of hopes and tears. AXGT.
Oh, I was going to do the AXGT.
86 horsepower. My twin brother Mike had one. Must have been about 89, 90. And we would rock it around these roads in the west of Wales where my parents used to live. And he's a very good driver. And he just, the way it sort of just rolled and carved and just but it's made of Baku foil. I mean, you wouldn't want to hit a curb in one. But yeah, so that's one of those two.
I think you've met my mate Tony from Cornwall, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah.
My mate Tony from Cornwall, big Tone. He's 6'4". He's a unit. He must be, he's north of 17 stone. He's a big boy, but he's, as in physically, he's built.
Yes,
he had an AXGT when we were young, and he had a massive shunt down in Cornwall in it. And he came out of the rear side window still in the seat.
In the seat.
It's unbelievable when you see the picture of the wreckage. There's a shout out for you, Tony. I know you listen to this, but your accident in the AXGT is still the most baffling thing I've ever seen. Why you're still here, I don't know.
The Martin Baker seat. Can you imagine?
It was outrageous, and the rear window as well. Wasn't the side window? It was the rear side window. The AXGT.
That's quite an achievement.
I've still got one. I love the fact that the French designed a cup holder in the door bin that could fit a bottle of Burgundy in the door bin. You can manage, if you see it, you can get both. It just fits a bottle of red Burgundy.
Yeah,
perfect.
brilliant.
But Claret, it's a bit tight. So Claret, it moves around too much. Red Burgundy, it's a bit better. So for me, I'm going with the M6 cab. I keep looking at them. I suspect I'm going to end up with one. I'll tell you two things. It's a car that it does drive well, and it's got a canvas roof. And the older I get, the more I want my convertibles to have a canvas roof, not one of these metal folding jobbies. And my hot hatch, I think I want to buy something that in period I didn't have the bollocks to buy, or there weren't many around. I'd like a Polo G40, because they made a supercharged Polo.
Yeah.
It looked great. And I reckon with some if you took that to Motec now, it'd probably have 180 horsepower, because they could map the shit out of it. Yeah. And then I'd get a really poppy exhaust, and I'd find out where Edward Lovett lived, and I'd drive up and down his back, popping and farting. Now we're going to take a pause in proceedings, and we're going to change the pace of this, because for some reason we've decided that our music choices for this week need to be tunes that make you want to weep. And crying behind the wheel of a car is absolutely acceptable, probably as good a place anywhere to do it. But we're a bit joyous at the moment, so let's just try and be a little bit more calm. Let's take the emotional temperature down a bit. And I'm going to ask Manish, what would you put music-wise in a car if you wanted to have one of those contemplative moments that just made your heart leap a bit?
There's a piece of music by Vangelis, which was originally composed for Blade Runner. It's called Rachel's Song. It didn't actually make the movie, but it's just a soul woman. She's just howling. And that's just to a very quiet xylophone and synthesizer. And it just builds and builds. And the reason why this makes me cry is actually, we were trying to find, when we made Senna, the perfect piece of music for the aftermath of his accident and his funeral. And we had to make a little 8-minute movie, Asif and I. And we did that with sort of YouTube clips and bits of Grand Prix and news clips. And we put Rachel's song on the aftermath of the accident right through to his funeral. And it ended with his sort of gravestone, his horizontal gravestone. And you hear this woman's haunting voice as Brazilians are sort of breaking down, and it kills me every time I hear it.
Go and listen to it. It's on the list. Neil Clifford.
I cry a lot to music. I think it's a healthy thing, crying. I think I've got better at it as I've got older as well, which maybe is a good thing. We should all have a little cry if we can. There's one song which I can't talk about, which I will cry even when I say the title. So my sort of second position on the crying front is actually it's crying, but it's also super optimistic. I'm sticking with America. I'm pretending I'm still in Miami, not in Farringdon, and I'm going Joni Mitchell because I'm sticking to my folk music and a wonderful, wonderful, velvety, incredible voice, and both sides now Joni Mitchell.
Yeah,
which is, it's sad, but it's not. It's about how you look at life, whether clouds make you happy, make you sad. It's about, frankly, money doesn't make you happy. Having millions of cars doesn't make you happy. It's about how you look at life, and you can look at it bad or look at it good, and it's the same thing you're looking at. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful song. And when I want to be sad but happy in one song, that's the one I play.
She was wrong on all fronts, but she was wrong about cars, because you do need a lot of cars. Because
she was the yellow taxi thing was maybe a bit wrong, wasn't it? But it's still a good track, isn't it?
Do you know what? It's sensational, and there's that rather moving scene in that pop film Love Actually, when it's played. Right. Emma Thompson, they're there going, "Ooh, bloody hell, welling up." Okay, Chris Cooper.
Yeah. So we talked a bit about this last night, didn't we? About what makes us cry, and that all of us, no matter how seemingly unemotional we are, have those moments and those things. And I'm going to write a book about this one day, so everyone will hear what this is about. But there was an episode in my professional life where I had to make a number of quite difficult choices to help an organization, and the parable of that was turning despair into hope. And I find turning despair into hope actually quite emotional. And I even thinking about it last night when I was writing my little story to the rest of the guys, found myself a little bit tearful. So things that turn despair into hope, or about hope, and I think it's about our long-running and eternal thread of optimism. I find Nimrod by Elgar.
Oh, yes.
A total guarantee.
Absolutely.
I've got to be in a moving car, can't be in traffic, can't be at traffic lights. Nimrod by Elgar just does it every time.
Yeah,
beautiful. Christ.
And anyone that's a big fan of Ed Reardon's Week will know that Elgar, the name of the cat, it always resonates. Edward, what's yours going to be?
Well, I think I admitted this I'm not sure I get emotional to music personally. It makes me feel all types of different ways. I probably do, but I can't actually I can't think of what the song is. Two things make me, my eyes well up. One of them's fucking Hay Fever, which we're right in the middle of at the moment.
Where does she live, Hay Fever?
Oh Jesus, you're a project, Lovett. You're a fucking project.
But the other thing, and this is why I asked Neil last night or last week what he listened to on the way to Miami. But most movies I watch on a plane on long haul, I well up to.
That's
now,
true.
and there is something about being in the sky. Chris, you told me tomato juice in the sky just tastes so sweet and lovely. But I think apparently watching movies in the sky does just make you well up. So, and it almost doesn't matter what that movie is. And I just can't correlate a song to those emotions. But I'll next time I'm flying somewhere and I have a little weep, I'll try and figure out what I'm listening to. But I have no song for you.
Truly extraordinary answer, as I expected. I knew it was going to be emotionally a bit of a vacuum, but I didn't realize it was going to be quite as brutal as that. But it's lovely to have it confirmed. Right, the most telling thing for me is that Neil Clifford did exactly what I'm going to do. There is one song, but I think like all these things, it's very personal, and I couldn't even say it. So I'm going to go for number 2, and I have to say that for me, I revert back to my youth and my what I used to listen to in the car with parents, and it's the Bach cello suites that just get me every time, particularly the prelude to the first one. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm you have to be moving, but it's an extraordinary piece of music, and every time I hear it, you just go, oh my God, lump in throat. But go and listen to it in the car, because this is the other thing about tunes that we associate with maybe having a watery eye moment, is that it might mean something totally different to someone else, and the context in which they first listened to it might be joyous. So you might go and listen to the Bach cello suites as you're seeing your child perform something brilliant, and you might have made that association with it. That's the great thing about music. So there's some good choices there, but I'd say Bach cello suites. I defy anyone not to have a bit of a lump listening to that. Right, I think that concludes our business for the week.
No, there's one final thing. We have a request of our audience.
We do.
We need your help. Manish Pandey has been finding many excuses not to buy a particular car. Oh, am I allowed
this is
to?
Not true.
Am I allowed?
Find it for me. Just find it for me.
We would like to be offered a Ferrari 456M GT manual. UK right-hand drive, Manish?
Please.
Fine. If you have one, get in touch with us.
With warranty.
With warranty. Yeah. Needs to be one owner from new, 5,000 miles. Green over tan.
Oh, fantastic! And if you've got 2, I'll have the other one, because I just think they're gorgeous, and it's probably the best Ferrari I drove in my first few years of doing this job.
I want it so badly, please.
And a B6 for 50 quid for Chris's birthday present.
We've got some demands this week. Thank you very much for enduring another Collecting Addicts podcast. We'll be back next week. Have a lovely time in the interim.